If dinosaurs were cold-blooded, Jurassic Park would have been a documentary about really slow lizards taking extended naps in the sun. Welcome to What If Horizons, the podcast where curiosity fossilizes common sense, digs it up 65 million years later, and asks it if it's still relevant. Today, we tackle a deceptively simple question with dangerously chaotic consequences. What if the entire Mesozoic era was basically a 3-act sunbathing session? What if Tyrannosaurus rex had more in common with your pet iguana than a bloodthirsty apex predator on a protein rampage? Let's rewind the global VHS to a time before feathers were cool, before meteorites ruined everything, and before Hollywood decided velociraptors were 6-foot-tall murder chickens instead of turkey-sized lizards with ambition. Let's talk about dinosaurs, but not the ones you know. The sluggish ones, the cold-blooded ones, the ones that probably wouldn't chase a jeep, but might stare at it for 20 minutes before deciding it wasn't worth the effort. You see, for decades we assumed dinosaurs were cold-blooded, like modern reptiles. It made sense. They laid eggs, they had scales, they didn't send emails. But then someone noticed they were kind of too awesome. Too big, too fast, too dramatic. So paleontologists started flirting with the idea that these creatures were warm-blooded, capable of generating their own heat, with the metabolic engine of a caffeinated hummingbird. But what if that hypothesis never gained traction? What if dinosaurs remained firmly in the cold-blooded camp, not because it made more sense, but because science decided to take a long nap and nobody set an alarm? The first casualty in this alternate timeline would be speed. Imagine a world where T-Rex, instead of sprinting at terrifying speeds, lumbered along like a hungover crocodile at a Sunday brunch. The iconic chase scenes, replaced by passive-aggressive staring contests. Predation would become a low-stakes game of attrition. Eat or be eaten, but sometime next week, depending on weather conditions. And oh yes, temperature. Cold-blooded animals are at the mercy of their surroundings. They don't have internal thermostats. So if our beloved dinos were cold-blooded, their day would revolve around two things: sun and not dying. Their schedule: wake up, find a rock, sit on it, wait until your blood is warm enough to contemplate basic movement, then maybe, just maybe, consider looking for food. But only if it's nearby. And slow. And preferably already asleep. Picture a triceratops perched awkwardly on a warm boulder, blinking slowly, waiting for its internal organs to boot up like a 1997 Windows PC. Herd migration, only if someone packed a heat lamp the size of a volcano. Entire ecosystems would change. The Mesozoic era wouldn't be a land of hyperkinetic giants battling it out in gladiatorial combat. It would be a living sauna filled with patient, thermally anxious creatures slowly negotiating the existential crisis of being alive in a world without sweaters. Cold-blooded physiology would also limit geographic range. No snowy wastelands full of plucky ankylosaurs. No polar expeditions for stegosaurus. If it wasn't sunny, dinosaurs simply wouldn't show up. It would be like waiting for your flaky friend Chad to appear at brunch. You know, the one who only comes if it's above 70 degrees and the bar serves mimosa pitchers. Dinosaurs in this world would be environmental introverts. They wouldn't rule the earth as much as lease parts of it seasonally. The fossil record would be less about dramatic skeletons locked in eternal combat and more about creatures who clearly just stopped moving. Fossils found under heat rocks. Fossils found mid-stretch. Fossils that look suspiciously like naps that got out of hand. And then there's metabolism. Warm-blooded animals need to eat constantly. Cold-blooded ones, they're more like intermittent fasters from another dimension. A T-Rex in this reality might eat one big meal and then ghost its prey list for a month. Velociraptors wouldn't pack hunt. They'd pack cuddle for warmth and occasionally hiss at butterflies. This changes the whole survival game. Less constant motion, more strategic loafing. But hold on to your fossilized hat, because we're just warming up, slowly, like a sunbathing turtle. In this timeline, dinosaur intelligence also takes a hit. Big brains require big energy, and cold-blooded metabolism doesn't offer the juice. That cunning pack of clever girls, replaced by a mildly confused committee of indecisive turkey lizards who occasionally mistake rocks for snacks. Strategy would be basic. Ambition would be minimal. World domination, too exhausting. Maybe tomorrow. And yes, extinction still looms. But now it's less of a fiery apocalypse and more of a really bad weather week that catches everyone off guard. Imagine an asteroid hits. Dust clouds blanket the sky. Sunlight vanishes. Warm-blooded animals. They go hungry. Cold-blooded dinosaurs. They just stop, pause, hibernate in dramatic fashion. Many would die, not in epic battles, but simply because their solar-powered bodies forgot how to function without a morning sunbeam and a motivational playlist of tropical warmth. It's tragic. It's slow. It's very, very on-brand. But what rises after them might be different. In this alternate history, mammals emerge not because they're better, but because they're weirdly energetic. Running around at night, sweating, complaining about taxes, building empires on caffeine and chaos. Dinosaurs. They become myths, legends of a time when creatures lived in slow motion and ruled the world by default, because no one else wanted to deal with the heat. And maybe, just maybe, the lesson here is that evolution doesn't always favor the biggest or fastest. Sometimes it just favors whoever shows up, eats a meal, and doesn't fall asleep halfway through an asteroid impact. Stay tuned. It only gets weirder from here. Let's imagine the daily routine of a cold-blooded Allosaurus. First, it wakes up. Not with a roar or a dramatic tail whip, but with a subtle shiver as the morning mist makes it question its entire evolutionary life plan. It stumbles out of its fern-covered nook, yawns, or does whatever the reptilian equivalent of yawning is, and begins the long, noble quest for a sunlit patch of rock. Breakfast, please. That can wait. The digestive system is still on low-power mode. First, absorb that sweet infrared radiation. After about 4 hours of strategic lounging and vitamin D absorption, our friend Allosaurus is finally mobile enough to consider hunting. But unfortunately, so is every other cold-blooded creature in a 10-mile radius. Suddenly, it's a slow-motion stampede of half-charged reptiles all limping toward the nearest edible thing like it's Black Friday and someone just opened the doors at a half-lit Best Buy. You see, in this world, hunting is a communal experience, not because of cooperation, but because nobody can afford to be picky or fast. Predators don't stalk prey, they loiter near them and hope gravity works in their favor. And then there's romance. Oh yes, cold-blooded courtship. Nothing says passion like a couple of lethargic sauropods laying side by side in silence, occasionally blinking at each other to indicate mild interest. Mating dances would be replaced by mating naps. Nesting, sure, just after a few more hours of sunbathing. Let's not rush into anything. But let's pull back for a moment and appreciate how the entire Mesozoic food web would be transformed by thermal dependence. In the warm-blooded timeline, predators keep herbivores on their toes. In the cold-blooded reality, herbivores have plenty of time to ponder philosophy between stampedes. Your average stegosaurus wouldn't be running from a predator. It would be checking to see if the predator is even awake yet. This gives rise to a truly unhurried ecosystem. Everything is dialed down. The adrenaline is gone. The drama replaced with quiet glances, long pauses, and a lot of lying very still. Nature documentaries would need completely different narrators. Not intense British voices whispering about survival. No, you need a narrator with the energy of a tired barista. Observe the mighty Diplodocus. It has not moved in 6 hours. Its only known enemy, cloud cover. What's fascinating here is the economic impact, not on ancient ecosystems, but on modern-day paleontology. Because if we believed dinosaurs were cold-blooded, the fossil record would be interpreted through a very different lens. All those bone beds filled with dozens of dead hadrosaurs. Today we imagine them being taken out by a cunning predator or a sudden catastrophe. But in cold-blood land, it might have just been a chilly Tuesday. Museums would be less exciting. Instead of dramatic displays with dinosaurs frozen mid-battle, we'd have reconstructions of dinosaurs half asleep on rocks. The dynamic, upright T-Rex posture, replaced with a dinosaur slouched in a very existential way, looking like it forgot why it stood up in the first place. Children's toys would reflect this shift. Instead of action-packed chomping figures with flashing eyes and terrifying sound effects, we'd get rubber models that droop in the sun and make vague sighing noises when squeezed. And merchandise. Oh, the merchandise. Introducing the all-new Thermo Rex, the first dinosaur toy that only moves when it's at exactly 82 degrees Fahrenheit. The cultural mythology around dinosaurs would also take a hit. We love dinosaurs because they seem larger than life, fast, ferocious, unforgiving. But cold-blooded dinosaurs would teach us patience, stillness, the art of waiting. Dinosaurs would be less like apex Predators and more like yoga instructors who took things very, very seriously. But maybe, just maybe, this alternate version of prehistory gives us a new model for resilience. Cold-blooded creatures don't rush. They conserve energy. They thrive in predictable climates. They don't overdo it, which, frankly, might make them better prepared for long-term survival than our modern, caffeinated, hyperactive species ever could be. Think about it. Humanity is in a perpetual state of overclocked panic. Always moving, always worrying, always inventing problems just so we can solve them. Dinosaurs, in the cold-blooded reality, had one job: stay warm and don't fall off the food chain. And they did that for over 150 million years, which is more than most tech startups manage. In this slower Mesozoic timeline, evolution doesn't rush to create feathers or wings or clever hunting strategies. It just double downs on the basics. Big bodies, thick skin, endless patience. This would also affect interspecies dynamics. In our world, predator-prey interactions are high-stakes thrillers. But in the cold-blooded timeline, it's more like a mutual agreement to occasionally look dramatic but mostly leave each other alone until one of them forgets to warm up properly. Even scavengers would struggle. By the time a cold-blooded predator finishes digesting a meal, it might have missed 3 heat cycles and a thunderstorm. Carrion would just sit there, uneaten, because everyone's digestive enzymes are off duty. Let's not forget the climate impact either. Cold-blooded ecosystems are exquisitely sensitive to temperature swings. If a cold front sweeps through, the whole forest just shuts down. It's like nature flipped a breaker and forgot where the switch is. Rainy week, no one moves. Volcanic winter, entire continents of dinosaurs go into synchronized power-saving mode. Birds, modern descendants of dinosaurs, wouldn't exist in the form we know. Flight takes enormous energy. Warm-blooded metabolism is a key enabler. Without it, the best a dinosaur could manage would be a dignified hop followed by a hard landing and several hours of recovery. In this timeline, instead of falcons and hawks soaring above us, we'd have ground-bound reptiles blinking at insects and wondering why they ever left the swamp. Still, you might be wondering, could any cold-blooded dinosaur have risen to intelligence? Could some sluggish lizard creature have beaten the odds and invented fire, language, or cryptocurrency? Short answer, no. Long answer, also no, but imagine how slow that first TED Talk would have been. Thank you for your patience. The real absurdities are just getting started. Now let us dive into the truly important question. In a world of cold-blooded dinosaurs, who actually runs things? Not the predators. They spend half the day trying to turn on their internal systems like prehistoric laptops stuck in sleep mode. Not the herbivores either. Their idea of strategy is standing very still and hoping nobody's hungry yet. So who's left? The plants. Yes, plants. You laugh now, but in this alternate history, flora dominates the power grid. Whoever controls the sunny real estate holds the real leverage. Think of it. The dinosaur with the best access to daily UV gets the fastest reaction time, the most calories processed, and the most successful afternoon strolls. Ferns are no longer just background scenery, they are life support hubs. And whoever owns the best patches of them becomes king. That's right, the entire prehistoric hierarchy becomes a game of territorial sun lounging. Alpha predators aren't alpha because of teeth or claws. They're alpha because they staked out a perfect 11 a.m. sunbeam on a west-facing slope. And as competition for these sunspots intensifies, a new kind of dinosaur emerges, not the fastest or strongest, but the best at real estate speculation. Picture a dinosaur with the body of a triceratops and the instincts of a hedge fund manager. It doesn't fight, it negotiates. It doesn't chase prey, it leases out mossy rocks for access to morning rays. This is what evolution looks like when metabolism takes a coffee break. Social structures would evolve not around family groups or hunting packs, but around shade dynamics. Dominant dinosaurs wouldn't hoard food, they'd hoard square footage with optimal sunrise angles. Conflict looks less like snarling and more like strategic nudging. You don't kill rivals, you cast a shadow on them. Cold-blooded passive aggression taken to its natural conclusion. Now let's consider the global climate. In the warm-blooded timeline, dinosaurs could adapt to a wide range of environments. But in cold-blood world, your latitude determines your lifestyle. Near the equator, life thrives in a toasty, humid frenzy. But go a little too far north and your local fauna consists entirely of sleeping lizards and confused-looking turtles. Migration becomes mandatory, not for food, but for thermal survival. Picture herds of sauropods slowly moving southward every winter, following the sun like ancient retirees. And with each migration season, an entire biome shifts in mood. Forests light up with sluggish foot traffic. Swamps become crowded with sleepy carnivores hoping someone else will make the first move. But then, something wonderful happens. As these massive creatures trail the warmth, they inadvertently become nature's great landscapers. Every time a herd shuffles south, it clears brush, spreads seeds, and fertilizes soil. Ecosystems flourish not because of active effort but because everyone is accidentally helpful in the laziest way imaginable. Imagine a cold-blooded T-Rex accidentally creating a new forest trail just by stumbling the same path for 3 weeks while trying to warm its liver. It's ecology by inertia, truly the most relatable kind of progress. And let's talk about extinction, the big one. The meteor, the blast, the blackout. In our timeline, the impact of that event wiped out warm-blooded dinosaurs largely because it disrupted food chains, blocked sunlight, and tanked global temperatures. But in cold-blood land, the impact still happens. Ash still fills the sky. The sun goes on vacation. But now, instead of instant death, we get global confusion. Every dinosaur just stops. Not dead, just frozen, literally. The world turns into one massive game of prehistoric freeze tag. For months, maybe years, some might survive in geothermal hotspots, huddled near volcanic vents like scaly hobbits awaiting breakfast. Others go into deep dormancy, their metabolisms dropping so low they barely exist. Dinosaurs become fossils in progress, not dead, just very, very paused. Which raises a chilling possibility. What if some are still paused? Deep in a jungle, under a mountain, buried in a cavern heated by ancient magma, there could be a cold-blooded dinosaur that never got the memo the apocalypse happened. It's just waiting, quietly, until the sun shines again. Scientists stumble across it. It blinks. They blink. A tense silence. Then it yawns, rolls over, and demands a heat lamp. Let's not rule this out. Speaking of scientists, cold-blooded dinosaurs would revolutionize how we study biology. Today, much of our understanding of prehistoric life is based on assumptions about warm-blooded behavior. If we rewrote the book with cold blood at its core, entire fields would have to shift. Paleontology would become more like forensic sun tracking. Paleobotany becomes central. Suddenly, the question isn't who ate whom, but who got the best sun exposure at 2 p.m. in late June. Behavioral reconstructions change too. Instead of packs or lone hunters, you get sunline clusters. Heat-sharing communities. You want drama? Try watching 3 carnivores share a single boulder without making eye contact. In this timeline, even survival strategies get weird. Camouflage takes on new importance, not just for hiding, but for managing heat absorption. A black-scaled dinosaur heats up faster but risks overheating. A lighter one stays cool longer but may never reach proper metabolic activation. Fashion becomes fatal. Suddenly, stripes and spots aren't for stealth. They're for thermal control. Evolution doesn't just select for speed or size, it selects for solar efficiency. Natural selection becomes a contest in being a better solar panel. And from this solar race perspective, one type of dinosaur takes the lead, the ones with massive frills, sails, and plates. You thought the Stegosaurus had those plates for defense or romance. Nope. Those were thermodynamic surfaces, heat catchers, the dinosaur equivalent of unfolding a lawn chair and just soaking it all in. In fact, some dinosaurs might have spent entire days posing like living sundials, adjusting their angle to maximize radiation. Picture a desert full of sauropods doing synchronized thermal yoga. Graceful, slow, slightly tragic. But don't worry, we're just warming up. If you're picturing a bunch of scaly giants in slow-motion sunbathing poses, you're not wrong. But let's now explore how this cold-blooded twist would have affected evolution in the long game, and that means asking the most dangerous question of all. What happens if they don't go extinct? In our original timeline, mammals crawled out from under logs and emotional repression during the dinosaur extinction and quietly took over the world. But in the cold blood scenario, dinosaurs aren't so much gone as just waiting for things to warm back up. So mammals never get that cosmic promotion. They remain fuzzy, high-strung background extras. We imagine the future differently now. Instead of humans evolving to sit at the top of the food chain, we get intelligent cold-blooded creatures slowly, methodically, sun-soaking their way toward sentience. Imagine a future where lizard philosophers lounge for hours before delivering a single sentence of wisdom, mostly because their brains take that long to boot up. And when they speak, it's not just deep, it's glacial. Entire discussions span days. An argument takes a week, but by the end everyone's tan and slightly dehydrated. Now here's the kicker. A cold-blooded society would look nothing like ours. Productivity is seasonal. Innovation follows temperature charts. There are no morning meetings because no one is coherent before noon. And forget rush hour. There's literally no rush. Everything proceeds with the pace and certainty of moss colonizing a sidewalk. The economy, pure thermodynamics. Jobs depend on your solar access. You want to be a high-ranking leader? Better get yourself a job near the equator and a really big hat with mirrored panels. Cold-blooded politics would be fascinating. Campaigns revolve around weather forecasts. Policy debates depend on cloud cover. Charismatic leaders are just the ones who tan evenly and don't pass out during midday speeches. And education. School hours only run during peak sunlight. Classes canceled due to overcast. Every week, students bringing sun lamps to cheat on thermoregulation tests. Absolutely. And if your test scores drop in winter, that's not failure. That's biology. Now, let's zoom in on culture. A society based on sunlight would develop a deep spiritual connection with the sun. It wouldn't just be a star, it would be a deity. Warmth becomes salvation, cold, a curse. Think religious holidays based on solstices, ceremonies involving synchronized sunbathing, and philosophical debates about the ethics of shadow casting. Architecturally, cold-blooded civilizations build cities like giant reptilian resorts. Forget glass skyscrapers. Think open plazas, heated stone courtyards, and buildings with retractable roofs for maximum UV access. Every home is a spa, every office is a sun porch. And art. Slow-brewed masterpieces. A single painting takes a year to finish because the artist naps every hour. Music is long, low, and rhythmically sun-dependent. Think chanting, the occasional hiss, and instruments that sound suspiciously like someone stretching on a warm rock. Even entertainment evolves differently. No thrillers, too fast. No jump scares, bad for the heart rate. Just epic dramas that span entire seasons, with cliffhangers determined by weather patterns. If you want to finish the episode, wait for summer. Now here's the twist. Cold-blooded intelligence, while slower, might actually be more sustainable. They don't burn out. They don't rush innovation. Instead, they move deliberately, carefully, considering every step. In the end, maybe their civilizations last longer than ours, not because they move fast, but because they don't. They don't build empires overnight. They build them over millennia, warmed by the same sun, never rushing. Never exploding, just unfolding like a very polite apocalypse in reverse. But while their society moves slowly, it doesn't mean they lack ambition. In fact, with enough time and heat, cold-blooded creatures could become masters of energy efficiency. They'd develop solar-powered tools, geothermal cities, and perhaps even a relationship with technology far more harmonious than ours. Because in a world where everything depends on warmth, they'd never forget that energy is sacred. No fossil fuel explosions, no runaway industry, just slow, balanced development with the sun as supervisor and nature as blueprint. And here's a wild possibility. What if one day, these cold-blooded descendants discover space travel? It sounds absurd. Rockets aren't exactly solar lounges. But remember, they've had millions of years to adapt. Maybe they've found a way to harness solar radiation not just for warmth, but for propulsion. Think massive, lizard-engineered space sails drifting through the void, seeking warmth among the stars. They wouldn't race to Mars. They'd glide, slowly, deliberately, with sunbathing breaks in lunar orbit. And if they ever encounter humans, the cultural confusion would be spectacular. We'd scream into the void with caffeine-fueled urgency. They'd blink once every 20 minutes and ask why we're yelling. But perhaps there's wisdom in their ways. Maybe in our haste to dominate, we lost something they retained: patience. Connection. A willingness to move only when the conditions are right. Maybe the future isn't cold-blooded or warm-blooded. Maybe it's sun-blooded. A balance between speed and stillness. A place where evolution isn't a race, but a long, thoughtful stretch. So the next time you see a lizard on a rock, staring into the distance with what looks suspiciously like judgment. Remember, they might be thinking deeper thoughts than we ever imagined. Or they might just be waiting to digest lunch. Hard to say, but isn't that the fun of it? Now, let's rewind the VHS of time. Yes, remember VHS. That ancient human invention that spun plastic in a box and somehow produced images, and returned to the age of dinosaurs. Let's peek behind the foliage and get a clearer picture of how cold-blooded physiology would have shaped the day-to-day lives of these ancient beasts. First, say goodbye to dawn patrols and midnight hunts. A cold-blooded T-Rex isn't springing out of bed to chase anything at 6 a.m. In fact, it's probably lying on a rock somewhere, eyes half open, wondering if its tail is still asleep. Everything hinges on the ambient temperature. Want to run? Warm up first. Want to digest that freshly caught triceratops? Better find a hot patch and bake for a while. So the predator-prey dynamic flips on its scaly head. In a world ruled by thermoregulation, who wins a fight depends not just on claws and teeth, but also on who's been sunbathing longer. You might be the apex predator of the ecosystem, but if a sudden cold front blows in, you're about as threatening as a sleepy iguana in a refrigerator. And if you think cold-blooded carnivores have it rough, consider the herbivores. Giant, lumbering sauropods with stomachs the size of bathtubs but the internal furnace of a tea candle. They would need to plan their meals around solar forecasts. You don't just eat 200 pounds of ferns and hope for the best. You map out where you'll sunbathe afterward like a seasoned beachgoer in Miami. Migration patterns would also shift. Not because food runs out, but because the sun does. Cold-blooded dinos would become creatures of climate. They'd chase the sun across continents, following warmth like it's a tour bus on a farewell concert. And what about reproduction? The romance of the cold-blooded courtship dance. Less of a dance, more of a synchronized basking routine. Male and female dinosaurs lying side by side on heated stones, occasionally flicking their tails at each other in a slow-motion flirtation that would make even sloths roll their eyes. Cold snaps, relationship enders, rainy season, no mating for months. It's all dictated by weather. Nature's way of saying, if you can't get hot, you can't get bothered. Now here's something to bake your brain: dinosaur parenting. If you're a warm-blooded creature, you can sit on your eggs like a chicken with a purpose. But if you're cold-blooded, sitting on eggs doesn't warm them. It just makes you both slightly colder and very confused. So cold-blooded dinosaurs would have to rely entirely on the environment. Maybe they bury their eggs in geothermal soil. Maybe they build massive solar nests out of reflective stones. Maybe they just cross their stubby fingers and hope. And this changes survival rates drastically. Fewer eggs hatch, fewer babies survive, which means dinosaur populations are lower. The entire ecosystem is less crowded, less chaotic, more politely spaced. No stampeding herds, no chaotic mass migrations, just slow, solar-synced cycles of life and death. But don't mistake slow for boring. In fact, it creates a world of strategy. These aren't just mindless beasts with muscle for brains. They have to plan, anticipate, predict the weather like prehistoric meteorologists. Imagine a velociraptor with a barometer and a sense of existential dread every time clouds roll in. Even their social structures might evolve differently. Warm-blooded animals tend to have tightly knit packs and herds. Social warmth replaces the heat they lose. But cold-blooded creatures don't need to huddle. They spread out. Territorial disputes are less about food and more about prime sun real estate. The ultimate flex isn't how loud you roar, it's how many flat rocks you control. And if you're wondering whether cold-blooded dinosaurs would be less aggressive, the answer is yes and no. Fights are rare, because conflict burns precious energy. But when they do happen, they're dramatic. They're the slowest, most passive-aggressive standoffs imaginable. Two theropods glaring at each other for 3 hours, swaying slightly, waiting for one to faint from heat exhaustion. In fact, many interactions become passive by necessity. Cold-blooded predators can't afford injuries. Healing takes forever when your metabolism only works on sunny days. So survival favors caution. The age of the cold-blooded dinosaur is not ruled by the bold, but by the strategic. And over time, that could lead to intelligence. Not the fast, impulsive intelligence of a monkey with a smartphone addiction. But the slow burn kind. The deep thinkers. The ponderers. Cold-blooded dinosaurs may not build cities overnight, but they might carve philosophy into stone with claws that have all the time in the world. Picture a stegosaurus sitting on a warm hill, contemplating the curvature of the earth. A pterosaur crafting poetry about the sky while waiting for its wings to defrost. These aren't just animals. They're potential sages, nature's original slow-cooked geniuses. And if they'd survived, who's to say they wouldn't have built civilizations? Sun-worshipping cultures with architecture based on thermal efficiency. Languages that only make sense when spoken slowly. A legal system that grants continuances for cloudy days. Libraries filled with stone tablets, each taking years to inscribe and even longer to read. It's a world that prioritizes patience, harmony, and the sacred art of not doing anything until it's absolutely warm enough. A world where cold-bloodedness isn't a limitation, but a philosophy. An entire planet built not around speed or dominance, but around waiting for the perfect moment. And that world, oddly enough, might be better off. Because in the race of life, maybe it's not about being first. Maybe it's about warming up properly before you even start. Now let's talk extinction. Yes, the ultimate plot twist of the Mesozoic era. The Cretaceous cliffhanger. The one where dinosaurs, whether warm, cold, or emotionally unavailable, met their untimely end thanks to a cosmic party crasher the size of Mount Everest. But what if our cold-blooded buddies were on stage when the curtain fell? Would it have played out the same way? You might think cold-bloodedness is a bad hand in an extinction-level event. And you wouldn't be entirely wrong. You're not bringing a solar-powered metabolism to an asteroid fight and expecting to win. But cold-blooded animals have a sneaky ace up their sleeve, and it's called low energy requirements. Warm-blooded creatures burn through calories like toddlers on a sugar rush. They need constant food, constant heat, and probably emotional support. But cold-blooded animals, they can go without food for weeks, months, even. Some of them could probably survive a Netflix binge longer than most college students. So when the sky darkened and sunlight took a sabbatical, cold-blooded creatures had an edge. Sure, it was colder. Sure, plants died. But if you're used to operating on solar panels and minimal snacks, you might just hunker down and wait it out. That's exactly what some reptiles did. Crocodiles, turtles, lizards, the cold-blooded squad that stuck around like background extras in Earth's blockbuster. Maybe, just maybe, if dinosaurs had been fully cold-blooded, a few more would have made it past the final credits. Let's rewind the tape again and imagine the apocalypse in this alternate world. The asteroid hits. Boom. Everything is chaos. The sky turns gray. Warm-blooded animals panic. Their internal furnaces go into overdrive. They eat and then, nothing left to eat. The furnace runs out of fuel. Game over. But our cold-blooded friends, they slow down, way down, heartbeats drop. They slip into a near hibernation state, like that one uncle at family reunions who disappears for a nap and returns 3 hours later with no explanation. They find shelter, curl up under volcanic rocks, maybe bury themselves in warm mud, or cling to geothermal vents like scaly spa-goers with a gift card to survival. And here's the kicker. They don't need to move much, or eat much, or do anything much. They just endure. It's the tortoise versus hare scenario on a planetary scale. The warm-blooded mammals sprint into the apocalypse. The cold-blooded dinosaurs crawl. And when the dust settles, who's still breathing? Exactly. Now that doesn't mean the planet turns into a dino playground again. The post-asteroid world is brutal. Temperatures fluctuate. Food is scarce. Even bacteria are filing complaints with management. But cold-blooded creatures have the toolkit for exactly this kind of hardship. Less metabolic stress. Greater adaptability to resource shortages. A general vibe of, we've seen worse. Maybe in this version of history, some cold-blooded dinosaur species make it through the bottleneck. Not many. Just a few scrappy survivors. Maybe a small theropod here, a duck-billed minimalist there. And they evolve, slowly, thoughtfully, with long pauses in between thoughts. Fast forward a few million years. You walk outside and see creatures that resemble birds, but they're not. They've got scales, not feathers. They sunbathe instead of preen. They're dinosaurs, alright, just more chill, literally. Evolution continues its lazy spiral, and eventually, one species gets clever. Builds tools, starts painting things, possibly invents TikTok but uses it only to post videos of leaves blowing in the wind. Civilization rises, not in a flurry of cities and conquests, but in a slow-burning meander. Technology develops, but only when the weather's nice. Trade routes form, but only during spring. Wars happen, but they're scheduled around seasonal warmth. Peace treaties include clauses like, no attacking before noon, and mandatory nap breaks if the temperature drops. And the art. Oh, the art. Massive sculptures carved over decades. Paintings made with pigment derived from sun-dried moss. Music composed to the tempo of a lizard heartbeat. Slow, deliberate, with just the right amount of existential dread. Imagine going to a museum where the guide says, this mural took 97 years to complete. And 83 of those years were just waiting for it to stop raining. In this alternate timeline, civilization still arrives. It's just patient. These aren't adrenaline-driven conquerors. They're sages, thinkers, sunbathers with a philosophical streak. Maybe they never invent the wheel. Not because they couldn't, but because they didn't feel like rushing. And maybe that's not such a bad thing. Because while humanity burned rubber and lit up the atmosphere with our frantic pace, this cold-blooded civilization took its sweet, solar-powered time. No fossil fuel dependency, no stress. Just bask, think, create, repeat. So the next time you're stuck in traffic, frantically checking your phone, juggling 6 tasks, and wondering why your coffee hasn't kicked in, consider this. Maybe we got it wrong. Maybe dinosaurs, if they were cold-blooded, would have built a better world. Slower, yes, but maybe also wiser. Stick around. We're not done basking yet. Let's saunter a little further into this cold-blooded civilization. Picture, if you will, a metropolis not pulsing with neon and caffeine but sprawling under an open sky, designed entirely around the angle of the sun. No skyscrapers, just wide plazas paved with sun-heated stones. No traffic, just a communal shuffle dictated by the gentle rhythm of nature's thermostat. In this world, rush hour doesn't exist. It's more like sunrise amble hour. The morning commute is a slow parade of scaled intellectuals dragging their tails and exchanging pleasantries like, nice thermal radiation today, or, mind if I bask beside you. Economies still exist, of course, but they don't revolve around frantic stock markets or high-frequency trading algorithms. Instead, value is measured in sunny real estate. Prime basking spots near reflective cliffs are like beachfront property. Forget gold. The hottest investment is literally hot. There's number 24-hour news cycle here. News spreads with the sun. Morning headlines are whispered from basking circle to basking circle, carried slowly by warm breezes and nosy reptiles. By the time the western cliffs hear that a comet nearly hit the moon, it's old news and everyone's already written folk songs about it. The military, oh, they have won. But it's more of a defensive sun shield coordination group. Their main tactic is to make the battlefield so boring and shady that the enemy gets sluggish and wanders off. Wars are rare, and usually fought with the dignity of 2 cold-blooded philosophers arguing over who gets the biggest rock to lie on. Education, naturally, is solar-powered too. Schools are held in open-air amphitheaters with stone seats arranged to maximize sunlight absorption. Lessons pause when clouds roll in, which is often unwelcomed. That's enough arithmetic. Class, the teacher sighs, let us meditate on warm silence. And speaking of meditation, spirituality in this world is centered not around fire or light, but heat. Temples are built atop geothermal vents. Worshippers lie down in perfectly still rows and chant slowly, their voices echoing with the wisdom of 10,000 sunrises. Religious holidays. Those coincide with equinoxes, naturally, with celebrations involving synchronized basking and competitive stillness. The winner is the one who moves the least while absorbing maximum UV exposure. It's very zen, and slightly toasted. Now let's be honest. You're probably wondering, what about art? What about culture? Can a civilization that literally needs the sun to function actually create great works of expression? The answer is yes, and they do it with the patience of tectonic plates. Picture colossal stone murals that depict dinosaur myths carved over centuries, myths about the first sun, the great cloud that lasted 7 days, and the hero who found the warmest cave of all. They write novels too, long ones, but don't expect action-packed plots. These are slow burns, real slow. Think, 100 pages describing how a protagonist repositioned himself to better catch morning light. Critics call them glacially paced, but deeply enlightening. Book clubs often last for years. sometimes generations. Cinema, surprisingly, yes, they invented it, kind of. But instead of flashy editing and chase scenes, their films are documentaries about sand dunes slowly shifting over time. Titles include hits like Thermal Drift and Shade Over the Valley. The acting is minimalist, very minimalist. In fact, most actors are just lying still for dramatic effect. One famous film involved a dinosaur blinking twice. It was a thriller. What about relationships? Ah yes, love in the time of thermoregulation. Courtship involves elaborate displays of stillness, careful rock choosing, and mutual agreement on optimum basking schedules. Love poems include lines like, "Your scales shimmer like polished shale," and, "When you lie beside me, I feel exactly 3 degrees warmer." Marriages are solemn ceremonies held at high noon. The couple stands together on a ceremonial slab, absorbing heat as a sign of unity. Vows include promises like, "To bask with you in health and in cloudiness." Divorce is rare, but when it happens, it's dignified. One partner simply shifts a few feet away and selects a new rock. No yelling, no drama, just a calm redistribution of shared sun. Children are raised communally, of course, and taught the sacred lessons early: stay warm, move slow, and never trust the weather forecast. So where does all this leave us? You, dear listener, likely warm-blooded, possibly caffeinated, maybe even multitasking as you hear my voice. What are we supposed to learn from our alternate cold-blooded counterparts? Is it a call to slow down? To stop running from meeting to meeting, inbox to inbox, notification to soul-crushing notification? Perhaps. Or maybe it's a gentle reminder that evolution could have gone very differently. That intelligence and culture and civilization aren't tied exclusively to a 98.6-degree internal inferno. That patience, stillness, and sunbathing aren't just leisure, they can be a way of life. Imagine a world where the height of ambition is the perfect nap. Where the philosophical question isn't, what is truth? But, what is the ideal rock temperature? Now don't get me wrong. Our warm-blooded chaos has its charm. We built rockets, symphonies, internet memes. We cured diseases, crossed oceans, invented espresso machines. But in our relentless charge forward, maybe we forgot to ask what our cold-blooded ancestors might have known all along. What if you don't have to do everything? What if sometimes, lying still is the most revolutionary act of all? And with that sizzling thought, the rocks are warm, and the questions are only heating up. Let's now dig a little deeper into the political arena. Yes, even cold-blooded dinosaurs have politics. Democracy exists, but slowly. Elections span months, sometimes years. Ballots are carved in stone, quite literally. Voter turnout is nearly perfect because, well, no one's in a rush to go anywhere else. Debates don't involve shouting or interrupting. They involve long pauses, contemplative tail twitching, and statements like, "I respectfully bask to differ." Candidates compete not by promising change, but by demonstrating superior stillness. The most serene wins. Imagine political rallies where crowds simply lie together on sun-drenched plains and hum in agreement. There are no scandals, only mild temperature disagreements and the occasional shady accusation about hogging thermal rocks. But despite their glacial pace, cold-blooded societies still grapple with complex issues. Climate fluctuation, for example, is a big deal. A sudden cold front can send entire cities into lockdown. Not for safety, but because everyone collectively falls asleep. Emergency services are trained in blanket distribution and motivational sun chants. Environmental policy is critical, too. Deforestation, not on their watch. Trees mean shade. Shade means reduced basking hours. If you try to cut down a tree, an entire brigade of thermal conservationists will surround you and glare until you stop. And no one wants to be glared at by a 30-foot lizard with a PhD in ecoethics. Technology, of course they have it. Just slowly developed. Computers run on solar chips. Literally. If it's cloudy, so is your internet. Streaming movies involves a lot of buffering, but hey, when your metabolism is slower than continental drift, who notices? Instead of apps, they use thermotabs, little flat stones that warm up when a message is received. They don't vibrate, they radiate. Notifications aren't pings, they're gentle temperature shifts. You get a message, you feel it in your bones. It's poetic, and also slightly uncomfortable. Medical science has advanced too, albeit with its own quirks. Doctors are more like solar engineers. Most ailments are treated with heat therapy, slow stretches, and gentle motivational basking. Surgery is rare. If something's broken, it's wrapped in a sun blanket and given time. A lot of time. A broken leg, 6 months. A bruised ego, possibly a decade. But patients are patient. After all, rushing the healing process might raise your internal temperature, and nobody wants that kind of scandal. So how do these creatures handle crisis? Say, an asteroid's on its way again. Surely, they can't slow walk their way out of that one. Oh, but they can. And they would. First, a planetary council would convene, each member arriving fashionably late due to suboptimal basking conditions. A full week is spent quietly considering the asteroid's trajectory. Then they decide, unanimously, to launch a countermeasure. The plan: not nukes, not lasers, a giant space mirror to reflect the asteroid's path, and redirect a little more sunshine toward the southern hemisphere while they're at it. The construction begins, slowly, methodically, but it's a beautiful thing to watch. Think ancient pyramids, but in space, and with fewer slaves. Just a lot of consensus and long lunch breaks under the stars. And they succeed, because cold-blooded creatures may move slow, but they think long. They plan not for the next quarter, but for the next epoch. They don't panic. They don't crash the stock market. They simply turn their necks to the sky, blink once, and say, "Let's do this calmly." And when the asteroid finally misses Earth by a wide margin, no one cheers. There are no fireworks, just a quiet nod, and maybe a celebratory 10-hour nap. Of course, not everything is utopia. There are still rivalries. Some species prefer warm swamps, others cold deserts. Tensions flare when a cloud lingers too long over shared sun zones. Occasionally, a rogue velociraptor claims territorial heat rights over communal rocks. These incidents are mediated by wise old turtles who've lived through 7 climate shifts and 1 particularly embarrassing ice age. Crime exists, too, but in strange forms. The most serious offense is shade stealing, when someone intentionally stands between you and the sun. The punishment: public shaming and relocation to a less sunny district. Repeat offenders may be sentenced to partial cloud exposure. It's considered cruel and unusual. Then there's the black market. Illicit sun lamps, unregulated geothermal vents, even bootleg hot stones. It's all very hush-hush, lit only by the faint glow of illegal warmth. But the justice system is restorative, not punitive. Offenders are brought to thermal court, where their temperature is measured, their motives analyzed, and a solution agreed upon over a shared sauna session. All of this might sound absurd to us, sprinting through our warm-blooded existence. But there's something elegant about a world where temperature is currency, time is abundant, and ambition is measured not in ladder climbing but in perfect stillness under a golden sky. And maybe, just maybe, it makes us question our own frenetic pace. We build fast, break faster, and rarely pause to consider the sunlit simplicity of stillness. In our world, stillness feels like stagnation. In theirs, it's a sacred art. So next time you're stressed, overworked, and 1 coffee away from a breakdown, think of your cold-blooded cousins. Lie down, let the sun hit your face, and ask yourself, what would a theropod do? The answer might surprise you. Or at the very least, it might convince you to slow down long enough to listen to next part, where the plot thickens, and the sun, well, it keeps shining. Let's venture into the realm of art and culture. Yes, even reptiles with scales thicker than your uncle's political opinions have an appreciation for aesthetics. Cold-blooded doesn't mean cold-hearted. In fact, when your internal thermostat is tied directly to the sun, emotional expression becomes an art form. Picture a theater carved into a canyon wall. The audience lies on warm stones, perfectly still, yet wrapped with attention. The performers, a troupe of stegosaurs reenacting ancient legends through interpretive tail swaying and synchronized head bobbing. No dialogue, no dramatic monologues. Just a kind of rhythmic reptilian ballet set to the low hum of vibrating vocal sax. Critics call it slow cinema. The rest of us call it 3 hours of peaceful napping. Painting is popular, though they don't use brushes. Dinosaurs paint with their tails, claws, or sometimes their tongues. The works are massive, typically spanning cliff faces. Abstract swirls of dust and clay form emotional topographies. A single painting can take a decade to finish, and that's considered quick. When the artist finally completes it, there's no gallery opening. They simply lie down, bask, and hope someone notices. Music exists too, but it's nothing like our catchy pop songs. It's more geological. Think deep, resonating groans that echo through stone and swamp. Each note is felt more than heard. One symphony can last a week, with pauses for sleeping, sunbathing, and philosophical disagreements about tempo. Of course, cultural icons exist. There's Leonardo da Vinci, known for designing the first passive solar heating system. There's Rex Gervais, a talk show host whose interviews move at the speed of erosion but somehow hold audiences spellbound. And there's the great philosopher Philosophus, who once wrote, "To bask is to be." His book sold dozens of copies, mainly because reading requires just enough movement to feel productive without actually doing anything. Education is an affair of patience. Children, hatchlings, rather, are taught to listen before they speak, think before they move, and warm up before exams. Exams, by the way, are open scroll and take approximately one lunar cycle to complete. No one fails. They just take longer. Schools resemble greenhouses. Lessons include thermodynamics, sun navigation, and the ethics of heat sharing. History classes cover volcanic migrations and the great solar eclipse of "Oh God, we froze." Students learn slowly but retain everything. When your species is blessed with centuries-long lifespans and an obsession with lounging, cramming is simply undignified. Religion also finds its way into the lives of these cold-blooded beings. Their gods are simple: the sun, the stone, and the shade. The holy trinity of heat. Worship is conducted in silence, with communal warming rituals and synchronized splaying of limbs. No shouting, no guilt, just a quiet understanding that life is about catching the rays while you can and not hogging the prime rock spot. Now let's talk love. Dinosaur romance isn't exactly passionate in the fiery, steamy novel sense. It's more of a long, slow warming of the heart, literally. Courtship begins with synchronized sunbathing and perhaps a gentle tail nudge. If the feelings are mutual, both parties may agree to migrate to a warmer territory together. If not, they politely drift apart at 1 meter per week. Marriages are celebrated with a ritual exchange of favorite heat rocks. The honeymoon, a shared thermal spring where couples soak, communicate in low-frequency rumbles, and occasionally nibble on algae. Divorce is rare, not because love always lasts, but because separating property means splitting territory, and no one wants to argue over basking rights. Even their version of war is strange. No fiery explosions, no battlefield cries. Just cold standoffs. Quite literally. The side that outbasks the other wins. Entire battles are decided by which army can stay warmer longer. There are skirmishes where both sides simply fall asleep in the sun and wake up unsure who won. War memorials are piles of smooth stones, not for the dead, but for those who had to wait the longest without heat. So how does the rest of the world view them? Warm-blooded creatures think they're lazy, arrogant, detached. But the cold-blooded folk, they know something we don't. They've mastered the lost art of slowness. They see the world in centuries, not seconds. They don't chase dopamine. They cultivate equilibrium. When we run around trying to do 20 things in one day, they bask and accomplish one great thought in 20 years. When we burn out from the sheer intensity of our ambitions, they're just getting started warming up their backs. There's a certain dignity to their way, an evolutionary whisper that says, maybe you don't need to rush. Maybe the best version of yourself is the one that takes its sweet time and gets there without sweating. Imagine a society that doesn't reward busyness, but calm. Not speed, but stillness. Not multitasking, but intentionality. They don't fear missing out. They fear cooling down too fast and not appreciating the warmth while it lasts. In that way, maybe the cold-blooded dinosaurs aren't extinct. Maybe they live on, not in fossils or fantasy, but in every quiet morning we let the sunlight hit our skin without checking our phone. In every moment we pause to breathe without scheduling the next 5. And perhaps that's the lesson. Not everything worth doing needs to be done quickly. Some things, some of the best things, take time. Take warmth. Take silence. Which brings us closer to the end. One final chapter remains, and in that last breath of reptilian reflection, we'll ask, what if it's us who have been living too hot, too fast, too loud? The answer is just a sunbeam away. Stay with me for the final stretch. And so we arrive at the last stretch of this prehistoric sauna session, our imaginations fully warmed up and ready to bask in the final glow of what it truly means to be cold-blooded in a warm-blooded world. Let's start by addressing the obvious question. If dinosaurs had in fact been cold-blooded, would they have survived the mass extinction event that wiped them out? The asteroid, the dust, the darkness, the long chill, all elements of a disaster that sounds like the plot of a poorly written apocalyptic movie involving a lot of running and bad decisions. Now, cold-blooded creatures are known for needing external heat to function, so when the skies darkened and global temperatures dropped, it wasn't exactly spa day for the reptiles. In fact, it was more like Earth put a giant ice pack on the entire planet and told everyone to chill. Permanently. Some scientists argue that being cold-blooded would have made dinosaurs more vulnerable. Without the sun, their systems would slow down, digestion would halt, reproduction would stall, and their general vibe of "everything can wait" would become tragically literal. But others offer a twist. Perhaps their lower metabolic demands might have actually helped them survive longer than the warm-blooded creatures who needed more energy, more food, and more chaos to stay alive. Cold-blooded dinosaurs could have slowed down into a kind of survival coma, like the world's largest lizards just saying, "Wake us up when this is over." Spoiler. No one did. And that brings us to the mirror. No, not the reflective one you avoid on Monday mornings, the metaphorical one. What if we, the rushers, the buzzers, the scrollers and screamers, are the outliers? What if cold-bloodedness is not a weakness, but a lost strength? A philosophy, a way of being. Think about it. Every meeting you suffered through that could have been an email. Every dinner you skipped to meet a deadline that no one remembers. Every time you sprinted through your day like your to-do list was chasing you with a machete. That's warm-blooded behavior. That's the cult of constant energy. Now imagine a life where decisions are made slowly and with purpose. Where days are shaped by sunlight, not notifications. Where your body tells you when to move and when to be still, and you actually listen. Where warmth is sacred, silence is noble, and naps are an act of spiritual discipline. That is the way of the cold-blooded. Of course, we're not reptiles. We can't just lie on a rock and call it a career. Society expects things like productivity, communication, and pants. But perhaps we can take something from our scaled ancestors. A small piece of their wisdom. A reminder that faster is not always better, and busier is not the same as meaningful. Take your mornings a little slower. Breathe like you mean it. Let the sun hit your face without checking the UV index. Walk without hurrying. Think without reacting. Live, just a little bit more, like a creature that knows the power of patience. And if one day, science builds a time machine and we're able to go back and confirm once and for all whether dinosaurs were cold-blooded, I hope we find them just as we imagined. Lounging peacefully. Not chasing, not fleeing. Just being. Just warming up for whatever comes next. Because in a world addicted to heat and speed, maybe what we really need is a cool head and a slow heartbeat. Thank you for stretching your imagination with me on this journey. If you enjoyed this episode of What If Horizons, do me a favor. Like it, share it, drop a comment telling me whether you're secretly part lizard. And most importantly, subscribe, so you don't miss the next slow-burning question that keeps us all up at night. Until then, stay warm, but not too warm. You're not a T-Rex on espresso. You're a philosopher in scales.